Tedesco. Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday, and thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar about how to measure success on a college campus in regards to a smoke and tobacco-free policy on a college campus. My name is Katie Moose. I am the College Program Manager at CYAN, or the California Youth Advocacy Network. You have a chat box as part of this webinar, and feel free to go ahead and use your chat box. There's also a Q&A box that you can use. Either one of those is fine. I'll get those messages either one you want to use. So use the chat box all along the way to ask questions or make comments, and we'll take a couple of breaks to read the chats that have come in. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording is going to be posted on our website, which is catobacco-freecolleges.org. If you want the PowerPoint slides themselves, I can just email those to you. We post the recorded webinars on our website, but not necessarily the slides. So if you want the slides, just email me and I'll send those to you. My email's at the end of this webinar, but I'll also tell it to you now. It's Katie, Katie, at cyanonline.org. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, one more very important announcement. We need everybody who is attending this webinar today to complete a very brief survey evaluation at the end of the webinar. So we implore all of you, each and every one of you, to please complete the brief survey at the end of the webinar. It's vitally important to us for our grant funding. So we really need those feedbacks. To make it even more exciting for you, we're going to be raffling away a Starbucks gift card. So complete your survey for a chance to win a Starbucks gift card that we will mail to you, or email to you, actually, at the end of this webinar. And I'm going to remind you again at the end. Okay, let's get started on how to measure success on a college campus once that college has gone smoke and tobacco free. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of share 3 different stories of 3 different campuses to get us thinking about the different phases of implementing a smoke and tobacco free policy. So story number 1 is a community college in Northern California. They went smoke and tobacco free just at the beginning of this year. It was a pretty fast advocacy campaign. The decision makers, the students came forward with a policy, and the decision makers said, that sounds like a good idea. Let's go for it. Why don't we just get started with our policy at the beginning of the fall semester? And this was at the end of the academic year before, so in the spring of the academic year beforehand. So they only had this summer, really, to prepare their campus for this policy. They posted some new signs, they took down the old signs, and they sent out an email. So once the new academic year started, just besides the signs, there wasn't a big push for this new policy. And what they saw, unfortunately, was that people just kind of ignored the signs and weren't really paying attention. And they continued to see high levels of tobacco use all around their campus, just like it had been in the year before. So this campus, unfortunately, is not seeing very much compliance with their policy. Story number 2 comes to us from CSU in Southern California, and they have been smoke and tobacco free for 3 years. They did a big push for their smoke and tobacco free policy that first year, and they did see a pretty high level of compliance. Though they continued to see people here and there continue to use tobacco on their campus, But now, 3 years in, while they still have a pretty high level of compliance, they do have some really stubborn smoking hotspots, and it seems that all the smokers on campus know where these hotspots are, and they go to these places. So this is a picture, for example, of a smoking hotspot that's underneath a stairwell on the side of the library on their campus. They have a few more on the outskirts of campus. And they're really struggling, even though, these people have been approached and told about the policy. They're not really caring much or listening, and they continue to congregate in these smoking hotspots around campus. Our third story comes to us from a UC in Central California, and they have been smoking tobacco-free for a while. They did a big push for their policy at the beginning. They have continued to send out emails from their president year after year about the policy. They have volunteers out there talking to anybody that they see using tobacco on their campus about the policy. And astonishingly, they're really pleasantly surprised that they actually do have very high compliance, and they're not seeing hardly anybody using tobacco on their campus. They're not seeing those smoking hotspots, and they might see somebody here or there vaping, but in their minds, they think this policy has been pretty successful. So, thinking about this, what does policy success mean to you on your campus? What phase would you say that your campus is in, and how can you get to that next phase? Pardon me for just a minute while I fix something on my screen here. How are you going to know when you're done working on this policy, when you can put it behind you and work on something else because you know that it's successful and you don't have to worry about it anymore? How are you going to know if you should keep spending time and money on the policy? And how are you going to go about convincing your administration that more needs to be done if you do think that more needs to be done? So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes right now to enter into your chat box right now. What does policy success mean to you? What would your campus look like if you had a successful policy on your campus? Somebody entered a comment that last school was actually CSU Long Beach. That's true. They're not a UC. I was giving these stories as examples. They're not actual stories, but they are, just examples of things that we see over and over again with campuses across the state. So I apologize that the sign didn't match up with my story. The sign was from CSU Long Beach. Okay, so go ahead and enter into your chat box. What does policy success mean to you? What would your campus look like if you were successful with a smoke and tobacco-free policy? I'll give you guys a few minutes to enter in your chats there. Enter into the chat box, what does policy success mean to you on a college campus specifically? Okay, it's taking a little longer for you guys to type in your stories. Oh, we have one that came in. So one person said policy success for them was having sufficient permanent signage, policy communication integrated into orientation materials and events, a group or a person or a position on campus that is a continuing point of contact for the policy, And then not much litter being found around the campus and high rates of compliance. Okay, awesome. If you guys, oh, we have one more here. Low percentage of students that smoke on campus aligned with a policy that is enforced by campus officials. Okay, so this person's really highlighting that the policy needs to be enforced in order to be successful. Whereas the first person was talking a lot about there being kind of a point person that is making sure that this policy continues to be part of campus communications. One person said that they agree with it needing to be enforced. So go ahead and keep typing those messages in, and I'll read some more as they come in later. So we had our evaluator actually conduct some interviews with some campuses that had been smoke and tobacco free for quite some time. And one of the questions in these interviews was, what does policy success mean to you, or what would a successful policy look like for you on your campus? And here are some of the responses that we got. So one person said, ultimately, it's when it's so ingrained in the campus culture that you don't need signage and communication. So it's become a total norm, just like we don't have to have signs that say, you know, don't inject heroin here on this campus. That is the norm. Everybody knows that. We don't need signs for it. So that's what this person is getting at. Another person said, I would love to see 100% compliance, just like on airplanes, which I'm sure it's not 100%, but it's very close. It's very, very high compliance. Another person from these interviews said, success is that people recognize and support that we're a smoke tobacco-free campus and willing to share that with others who might not be aware. So for them, something that was really important was that if another person saw somebody using tobacco on campus, that they would approach them. So a bystander would be willing to, you know, say something to a person that they saw using tobacco on campus. We've had a few more comments come in. One person is talking about having staff and faculty support the tobacco-free policy. That's success for them at this point. That's what they're really looking to try to do. Thank you for sharing that. Lastly, another person from the interviews said success is when people are aware of the policy. So for them, they're kind of far back in the phase. Maybe they're like that campus number 1, where there's just a lot of people that aren't even aware that they're a smoke and tobacco-free campus. So now that we've kind of reflected a little bit on the fact that success can be different for different campuses, kind of depending on what phase you're in and where you're trying to get to next, you know, success doesn't always look the same to everyone. So now I'm going to go and dive into some different data collection options for you. So what should you measure when you are trying to measure success and you're trying to look at your smoke and tobacco-free policy? We've broken it up into 3 different ways to measure a smoke and tobacco-free policy on a college campus. So first of all, you could measure the amount of effort that your campus is putting into your smoke and tobacco-free policy. That's that first box there. After that, you can start to look at, okay, once we know the campus is actually doing things to promote this policy and putting in some effort, then you can start looking at, are these efforts working on campus? And then thirdly, you can think about how you can measure kind of those longer term impacts. Is this policy having an impact the way that we wanted it to when we were first advocating for a policy? So when people bring this policy forward to their decision makers at the very beginning, you know, a lot of times they have different reasons for wanting to do this. Decreased exposure to secondhand smoke is one, but there's also just decreased rates of tobacco use overall among their entire campus community, students, staff, and faculty. So helping people quit, preventing young people from ever starting in the first place, changing those social norms on campus. So those are those longer-term impacts that you can also consider measuring. So I'm going to go into each one of these and talk about some different options for each of these. So first, we're going to talk about the campus efforts. So what is your campus doing to make the policy successful? This is measuring effort. One thing that you could think about when you're trying to measure effort is just one person or department taking on all the responsibility for this policy, or is it being shared across the campus community by many different departments? And we're thinking of this and calling this policy integration, meaning that it's being integrated across your campus and it's not just one person's job to try to make it work. So a tool that you can use to measure policy integration are these department checklists that we have developed. I think we released these about 2 years ago now. So here I'm going to share what those look like here. So we are calling them policy integration guidelines. They're on our website. If you have trouble finding them at all, just email me and I'll email them to you. It's a packet. It has implementation guidelines, like a timeline and stuff like that. But it also has the following 11 department checklists. So we have checklists for campus administration. We have a checklist for communication and marketing, for facilities and maintenance, for student affairs, etc., and all of these ones that are listed here. So this tool is meant for campuses that are new to implementing a smoke and tobacco-free policy, but we also think that it's very helpful for campuses that have been smoke and tobacco-free for a while, but are still experiencing issues around compliance. This can be a tool to look at, okay, how else can we try to increase compliance, or can we be promoting the policy in different ways? And you can go and check in with all of these departments using these checklists and ask them if they're doing their part to promote the policy. So here's an example of the human resources checklist that is a part of this packet. So for example, some things that human resources could do to help promote the policy are to include policy language, like a sentence or two about the smoke and tobacco-free policy in their job descriptions, in their employee offer letters, in their orientation packet. They can also talk about the policy in outreach presentations that they're conducting. For managers and supervisors, you could have the policy and disciplinary procedures in new manager and supervisor as part of their trainings that they get. You could provide a counseling memo that managers can give to staff that violate the policy, that continue to use tobacco on campus, and so on and so forth. So we have checklists like this for all of the 11 departments. Oops, sorry about that, guys. All of the 11 departments that are listed here: student housing, international studies, human resources, and so on. Okay, so that's one way to measure campus effort. Another way that you can measure campus effort is to think about, is your campus taking a multi-pronged approach to the policy? Are you doing things to educate people about the harms of tobacco? Are you doing anything around tobacco treatment and making sure that tobacco use treatment is available to staff and students and faculty? What are you doing in terms of enforcement? And a tool that we didn't develop, but that the UC Smoke and Tobacco Free Task Force developed, is their policy dashboard. And this is what that looks like. So this is just the first page where they have the measurements around the policy language itself. For example, does the policy include marijuana? Does it include exemptions for research? And then you can see right below the policy language, it starts to go into how is the campus promoting the policy. It has some of those things that are, for example, on the checklist that I just went over, but it's like, are you promoting it with leadership communication, so emails from your president or your dean or your chancellor? Is it being included in student orientations, in new employee orientations, and so on and so forth? So beyond this, on the pages after this one, they also have checklists for, what is your campus doing around tobacco prevention and outreach? So that's like hosting events, doing social media campaigns and things like that. What is your campus doing around tobacco treatment? What is your campus doing around enforcement? And is your campus collecting any data on whether this policy is being successful, like tobacco use rates among your staff, students, and faculty is an example of the data that they have listed on this dashboard. So this dashboard could be very helpful to you, and you wouldn't have to include everything that's on it, but you could pick and choose the things that are important to you. This is not on the CA Tobacco Free College's website, but it is on the UC Smoke and Tobacco Free website. So you just Google UC Smoke and Tobacco Free and you'll see it there on their website. If you have any trouble finding this or the checklists or anything else that I am talking about in this webinar, please email me and I'll just send it to you as an attachment to make it easier for you. Okay, finally, another thing that you can and should measure when you're thinking about the amount of effort that your campus is putting into this policy is to think about signage. Signage is very important, obviously, and the question is if you have enough signage, if it's in the right places, and if this isn't on this slide, but another thing that's important to think about is if it's saying the right things or sending the right messages, having the right pictures on it, for example. And one way that you can track signage on your campus is by utilizing a campus observation form, and this is what that looks like. So this is the CYAN. We called it an environmental scan form at that time, but sometimes we also call it a campus observation form. This is the question on the first page of that form in regards to signage, and you can see that it's asking what types of signs are currently on your campus. So are you utilizing a variety of different types of signs, which can also be important? Where are they located? Do you have any of the old signs still up? Is another question that's on this form. Do you still have ashtrays around your campus, which can serve as a cue for smokers that is a place where smoking is allowed? So that can also cause a problem in terms of compliance with your policy. The scavenger hunt thing that you see here on this slide is in regards to a fun idea, an event that UC Riverside came up with a few years back, and they were getting ready to implement their new policy, and they really needed to find all of the old signs and make sure that they get them all down, because if you have some of the old signs still up that talk about no smoking within 20 feet of the doorway, and you put your new signs up too, that can create confusion and also cause problems with compliance. So what Julie did at UC Riverside was she created a game, a scavenger hunt game, and sent out some staff and faculty and student volunteers that care about this issue and wanted to pitch in and help. And she had them go all around campus and take pictures of the old signs and send those back to her, and then she gave away a prize for, I don't know if it was the person who took the most pictures or what it was, but that's one idea that you could utilize to help with tracking your campus signage. So in this section, we've talked about how to measure the effort that your campus undertakes when you go smoke and tobacco free. We talked about possibly utilizing the department checklists that CYAN released a couple of years ago and that are on the catobacco-freecolleges.org website. We talked about maybe using the UC dashboard, which is on the UC Smoke and Tobacco Free website. And then we also talked about using campus observation forms to really focus in and track signage and really get a handle of how many signs you have out there, what they're saying, and where they're located. I think that's all I'll say about those three right now. There's pluses and minuses to each of them, and I'm going to go over kind of a basic data collection plan more towards the end, so we can talk about, what we at CYAN would recommend that you do at the very least if you have minimum time and resources to spend. Okay, so we're going to move on to this second aspect. Once you've looked at, okay, what are all the efforts that your campus is undertaking, now you can start to think about, are these efforts working? Are they trickling down to your campus community? So one of the things that you can think about with this is policy awareness and support. Do people on campus know about the policy, number one? And then number two, do they support the policy? And one way that you can try to get at this question is by using campus surveys, and we're going to look at those right now. So this is an example of the CYAN campus survey template. You see the little highlighted pieces are where you would put in your own information from your own campus. This is also available on the catobacco-freecolleges.org website, and again, I can email it to you if you're interested and you can't find it on our website. You can conduct these surveys of your campus community either online or in person. So this is an example. The one that you'll find on our website is a paper form. So this is, this is something that you would do in person, potentially at events that you host on campus, maybe where you're tabling, or maybe you send some student interns out during busy times, maybe around lunch, and try to collect some more of these paper surveys. But if you're interested in doing these online, you can just enter these questions into whatever online platform your campus uses for surveys, perhaps SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics. We actually have two versions. We have a longer version, which is what you're seeing here, and this is just the first page of that longer version. But we also developed a brief 5-question survey because we know that sometimes these longer surveys can be difficult, and it can be difficult to get people to complete them. So we wanted to create one that was just super quick. It would take somebody maybe 2 minutes to fill out, and that is also available on our website. And with a survey like this, you can start to look at policy awareness and support, and you can also ask questions about secondhand smoke and also secondhand vapor exposure on campus, and just get those self-reports of how many people on your campus are saying that they're being exposed to secondhand smoke or secondhand vapor while they're on campus. One thing to note is that it is important to try to get a representative sample of students, staff, and faculty, because I think the different populations can be exposed to different things and can kind of have different awareness. They can have different exposure to secondhand smoke, so that is something to think about, not just surveying students. Okay, so another way that you can try to figure out if these efforts are working is to look at actual tobacco use on campus. Are people continuing to use tobacco on campus? And the form that we have available for that are, again, back to those campus observations. So this is that same observation form, but now we're looking in at some different questions that are on that form, where now we're looking at the number of individuals that are being seen either smoking tobacco or using tobacco or vaping or using e-cigarettes. And we have it broken down here. You can see that we have it focused on some different areas around campus that we tend to see campuses have some issues around these areas typically. So around the library is very common. Administrative buildings are common because staff members oftentimes continue to use tobacco on campus. And then in any student union, cafeteria, or quad area is also another place that you can look. And so when you send your student interns or your staff or whoever is out doing these, and this form does include some instructions on this, you want to instruct them on, how long they should stand and observe and count people that they're seeing, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You want to make sure that you are sending them out during busy times of day and year, and that the weather is nice enough that people would be out there using tobacco. The point of that is that you have to do it the same time every time you do it, so that if there are changes that you're seeing over time, year by year, that those are due to your efforts and not because you sent the students out during summer break, or you sent them out on a day that was raining. So it's really important that when you use this observation form, that you take all of that into consideration and that you do it exactly the same time every time you use this observation form, so you can track changes over time. You can also track hotspot locations with this form, and similarly locations of tobacco waste, which tend to be the hot spots, right? So you can see that there's a bunch of cigarette butts in this certain area, and that that's a smoking hotspot. Another tool that you can use besides the campus observation form shown here is to do tobacco waste cleanup events. And we do have a tobacco waste cleanup event protocol on our website. And that is where you send volunteers out all over your campus to collect cigarette butts and vape pods and any other tobacco waste that is found. And then you compare those numbers year by year to see if they're increasing or decreasing over time. And that can help you also get a sense for if your efforts are working, if they're trickling down to the population. Something that's important to note if you do a tobacco waste cleanup event is that you really have to work with your maintenance and facilities to make sure that you are doing it consistently year over year, whether that means asking them to not pick up any cigarette butts or tobacco waste for a week prior to your event, or even working with them to have them actually collect the waste for you and then either give it to you or count it for you. So yeah, partnering with facilities and maintenance is a really important part of doing a tobacco waste cleanup event in order to get accurate data. So finally, another way that we can think about trying to measure if your efforts on campus are working is to go to the campus student health centers, if your campus has a student health center, and look at if people are trying to access tobacco treatment services more often, and or trying to quit more often. And this is especially important if that part of the policy is more important to some campuses than others. So some campuses, for example, include the 1-800-NO-BUTTS hotline on all of their smoke and tobacco-free signs. some of them, really do a big push towards trying to get people to access tobacco treatment services on campus. So if that sounds like your campus, then something that's helpful to do is to work with your student health center to track some of that data. So some of the things that you can ask them to help you track are the number of new students, staff, or faculty that are enrolled in any tobacco treatment services that you might offer on campus, and see if those are increasing or decreasing. If you offer nicotine replacement therapy on campus, you could track the number of people that are requesting those products. And if your student health center is referring people to the California Smokers Helpline, you could track how many people are being referred to the California Smokers Helpline year over year. So this is another instance where it's really important to do it the same way every year. And in this case, it's really important to collect that baseline data, which means you kind of have to know where you started before the policy or before you tried some different promotional efforts. You have to collect that baseline or before data in order to see if there's a change afterward. So maybe you are going to post some new signs, and your signs are going to talk about tobacco treatment services that are available. So you're going to want to collect baseline data, post the new signs, and then give it some time, 6 months to a year, and collect your post data to see if those signs have made any difference in the number of students that are going into the health center to access services. So in this section, we talked about 3 different ways that you can start to measure if your efforts are working. We talked about conducting campus surveys, either online or in person, with staff, students, and faculty on your campus to measure policy awareness and support and exposure to secondhand smoke and vapor. We talked about conducting observations, where you send out student interns or staff to just be the eyes around campus and take note of how many people they're seeing smoking and vaping on campus and where the hot spots are. And that's an instance where you have to do the observations more than once to see if there is change over time. And we talked about the health center data also being another important resource for you, especially if your campus is more focused on promoting treatment services that are available. Okay, so now we're going to get into this last piece of it, which is the policy having a long-term impact, or is the policy working in the ways that you hoped it would when you advocated for this policy from the beginning? And some ways that you can think about how you can start measuring this long-term impact are twofold. So first of all, you can think about if the policy on your campus is starting to change tobacco use social norms. And we think that that part of it is super important, and for us, that's the main reason why we advocate for smoke and tobacco-free colleges and universities in California, because we're trying to change those tobacco use norms and make tobacco something that's only in the past, that people don't do anymore. And so you can do that campus by campus. So you can start to think about the perceptions of your students. And if your students on campus think that their peers are likely to be tobacco users, and what percentage of their peers they believe use tobacco. And you can collect this kind of information from campus surveys, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But you can also take a look at the tobacco use rates themselves. So what percentage of your staff, your students, or your faculty identify as tobacco users, or say that they have used some kind of tobacco product in the last 30 days, for example. And there are two ways that I can think of, there's probably more, but there's two ways that I can think of that you can gather this type of data. One is from the ACHA-NACHA survey, which is the American College Health Association National College Health Assessment. And the ACHA-NACHA survey, it's a survey about overall health behaviors among college students, but tobacco use is part of that, and they do break it down by different tobacco products, which is helpful. And I know that all the UCs implement this survey, I think, every year. And I believe that the CSUs, all the CSUs also do this survey every year. And then a small handful of community colleges implement this survey on their campuses every year. So that is some data that might be out there that you might not be aware of, that you might be able to tap into to track those tobacco use rates over time. Another way that you can track tobacco use rates over time is by doing the survey yourself. And again, we're going back to that campus survey, which I've already talked about a couple of times, but focusing in on a different part of it. So you can measure the policy awareness and support. You can measure the secondhand smoke exposure that, like we've already talked about. But with a survey like this, you can also measure student perceptions, which I think is something that the ACHA-NACHA survey, at least at one time, has done in the past as well. And when you look at those results from past surveys on student perceptions, what you tend to see is that although tobacco use rates tend to be pretty low, especially in California, down between 10 and 20% of students actually use tobacco. When you ask students what percentage of their peers do they believe use tobacco, you will see that their guesses are extraordinarily high. And they'll say, oh, like everybody I know uses some kind of tobacco products. It's got to be like 75% or 80%. So that disconnect between their perceptions and reality is something that you can start to measure, and you can start to think about how you are changing the perceptions and changing the norms on your campus. And you can hopefully start to decrease those high percentage guesses among your student population where maybe before the policy they figured, so many of their peers use tobacco. After the policy and you've created that healthy campus environment and they're not seeing it all around them all the time, we're hoping that those guesses start to go down and they start to say, oh, not that many people that I know use tobacco, and you'll see that percentage decreasing. And we're hoping that that is a measure of changing student norms over time. And then you can also measure actual tobacco use behavior with these surveys. So you can just ask the students, staff, and faculty if they use tobacco, what kinds of tobacco products, and how often they're using them. And that's another sort of long-term impact that we're hoping these policies decrease those rates of use over time. Okay, so here's that basic data collection plan that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. We wanted to make some recommendations for folks that are, really limited with staff time, maybe really limited in terms of budget. We think that a good basic data collection plan for your campus could consist of the following 3 forms, okay? So number 1 are those department checklists to help you get a sense for how much effort your campus is putting into this policy, and if the other departments around campus are pulling their weight or doing the things that they need to be doing so that the people that they interact with, such as staff and faculty, for example, are being told about the policy and are aware of the policy. So you could just contact each department and check off the things that they're doing once a year, and just make sure that the number of check boxes that you're checking off year by year aren't going down, that they're not stopping to put the policy in their new employee orientations, for example. And, if you are really struggling with this, then your goal could be to make the number of check boxes that you're checking off every year actually increase year by year to really start to integrate that policy across your campus. Secondly, you could implement the 5-question campus survey once a year. And we have, as you can see there, that second question is, what percentage of students on campus do you believe use nicotine in any form? And this is getting at what I was talking about earlier, where you're looking at what is the perception of your students, and is this policy really changing those norms over time? But you're also, with this brief survey, you're also collecting information on if they're aware of the policy and if they support the policy and if they're being exposed to secondhand smoke. We would suggest that you implement this survey online if possible, just because that makes everything easier, and to do it once a year with staff, students, and faculty. Finally, conducting campus observations are obviously important, because if you're trying to get a sense for if this policy is working on campus and if people are complying with it, the best way to do that is just to send people out to be the eyes and ears of the campus and to just know what's happening around campus, know if there are hot spots, know if the hot spots are moving, and really try to track how many people they're seeing using e-cigarettes around campus. The campus observation forms are also going to help you track signage, which is super important, just making sure that the signs that maybe you have posted that first year of the policy are still there, that they haven't been vandalized or taken down. So signage is super important, and the observation form will help you track signage as well. So a little bit about troubleshooting. So we have many campus partners that have been smoking tobacco free for a while, and experienced some problems over the years. So here are a couple of recommendations for how you can address maybe some stubborn hotspots, maybe some continued non-compliance with your policy. Some additional ideas here are to try to find out more about the individuals that continue to violate the policy. So you might look at them and assume that they're staff or assume that they're an international student, for example, but it would be nice to know for sure who these people are. So, we would suggest that you try to get to know them if they're willing to talk to you, maybe even do interviews with a couple of them, or conduct focus groups with some people that continue to violate the policy, just to find out more about who they are and, what their awareness is and why they continue to violate the policy. And then once you have a better idea of who is continuing to violate the policy, now you can go back to those checklists and think about, is there a department in these checklists that could be doing more to promote the policy? So if, for example, you're having a lot of trouble in housing, then maybe your strategy could be to utilize the housing checklist, work with the staff there to get them to promote the policy more. Same thing for if you're having trouble with staff, you could utilize the human resources checklist, or international students, you could use the International Center checklist. Okay, so this is going to be another time where I'm asking you guys to use the chat box. So heads up, get ready to type. So changing smoking behavior on campus. I wanted to have a little bit of discussion about this and hear your guys' ideas and thoughts on this important topic. So smoking hotspots are visible, right? People congregate together in groups around campus. The smoke is rising above them in the air. It's very obvious what they're doing. And even after they've dispersed, piles of cigarette butts are left behind. So we get a lot of calls and complaints about stubborn smoky hotspots, and that seems to be what most campus staff and people who are working on this policy kind of focus on and want to correct because it's so visible, you can see it, it's right there. However, we know that rates of e-cigarette use, and especially Juul and these other new e-cigarette products, have really been skyrocketing, especially in this last year. They are continuing to increase. We know from talking to students that students are using these products sometimes even indoors, but they're very hard to detect, right? Because people don't gather together in groups as much to vape like you do for a cigarette. People just pull on the vape to and from classes. They do it alone. They do it stealthily. The cloud is really small. A lot of times people try to kind of blow it down or in their shirt so you can't see the cloud. And the devices fit in the palm of your hand, so you can't even see it like you can a cigarette. So the question is, and what I want you to type into your chat boxes, are what are some ways that we can better capture data around vaping on campus? I'm curious to know if any of you have really tried to focus on this issue and collect information or data about the amount of vaping that is happening on your campuses. So go ahead and type your responses in, and I'll give you a minute. We only have 15 of you on this webinar, so if you think somebody else is going to type in, it's got to be you. Let me know if you have thought about this as an issue and have considered anything that you might want to start doing to try to track vaping around your campus. We have one response here to observe the busy hallways. Yeah, that's a good idea. Just to send people out to stand there for maybe 30 minutes or even an hour and just count the number of people that they're seeing vaping. Observing campus dining or food court, another good suggestion. Another person says, my thoughts go to surveying, which isn't always the easiest, most feasible thing to do. True. But I think of educational booths and using those opportunities to capture students with just one question. How often do you see people vaping on campus? That's a great idea, Melissa. Adding that to a survey that you do during an event. How often do you see people vaping on campus? Another suggestion we have here, have volunteer students and staff record where and when they see someone vaping around campus throughout the day. Yeah, these are all good questions, or suggestions, sorry. Asking faculty or staff where they have seen people vaping or how often they're seeing people vaping. That's another great suggestion. Thank you guys so much for helping me out with that. We have also thought about focusing more on e-cigarette waste if you do a cigarette butt cleanup event on your campus. We're kind of curious to see if there are a lot of pods. Those are the things that go in the Juul e-cigarette and other pod-based e-cigarettes. Can you guys type in, have you been seeing many pods around your campus? Would it be helpful to also collect the number of pods that are being disposed on your campus or other e-cigarette waste? We have another good suggestion, implementing this survey in class for health science. Yeah, because the health science professor would probably be interested in doing that. That's a great idea. Yeah, so including e-cigarette waste in a tobacco waste cleanup doing observations, and then including those questions in the campus surveys as well. So it's definitely something we need to keep in mind, that this is something we also need to be tracking, not just cigarette smoking around campus. Because when you focus on the cigarette smoking, I think what's happening, this is what I've noticed anyways, is that you start getting a lot of complaints about staff and about international students, because those tend to be like older people and people from other countries smoke cigarettes at higher rates than young people in California do. So then you start getting the sense that, oh, it's just all staff and international students are just causing all of the problems on our campus. But in reality, there's probably a lot of students that are vaping around campus. It's just harder to see. Okay, we got a couple more really good suggestions here. Okay, let's see. Pods are not popular in college campus, but more frequently heard by high school and middle schoolers. That is true. And so our thinking is that as that new generation is going into college this year, that we're going to start to see a lot more pods on campus. And I was just curious if that was happening already on some campuses. But it is more popular in high school and middle school, at least right now. I think generally people are better about disposing of e-cigarette waste in trash cans. They dispose of them less often. That's true, because a pod is like a whole pack of cigarettes, whereas a cigarette butt is just a single cigarette. And they're less gross, or at least that's the perception, at least. So you can put them in your pocket or your backpack. Okay, that's a really good point, Melissa. I've heard students are more inclined to perceive the e-cigarette waste as plastic, and people are more conscious about throwing plastic in the trash, not the ground. That's right. Whereas people tend to think the cigarette butts are made out of cotton, which is not true. They're made out of plastic too. But that fact is not widely known, and it's not obvious like it is with the pods. That's a great point. Yeah, this is great. Let's see. We do see many pods on campus in the residential areas around campus too. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So we do have at least one person that is seeing a lot of pods. So it might be helpful to try to collect those and kind of track that as another measure of success on your campus, especially if you're doing more education around e-cigarettes and outreach around e-cigarettes. Excellent. Thank you guys so much for typing in your great ideas. So that's all I have for the how to measure success portion. Before we wrap up, I have a couple of things. Number one, you will receive a survey evaluation of this webinar when you leave and close out the webinar. I think it's going to pop up on your computer, maybe in a new window or something. It's very, very important to us that you fill out that survey. We need those survey responses for our grant, for our funding, in order to continue to provide the services that we provide to you. We need you to fill out those evaluations. They're super quick. I think it's like 5 questions, and we're going to give away a Starbucks gift card. So I would really appreciate it if all 15 of you completed an evaluation. We really need those evaluations, so thank you so much for doing that. Secondly, I have just a few upcoming opportunities from us here at CYAN, especially for those of you who are working with college students. So the first one is Earth Day. You can register your campus for Earth Day, and we'll send you a big box of Love the Earth, Live Tobacco-Free tote bags that you can provide to students during an event, an Earth Day event on your campus. We also have a toolkit that has information about the harms of tobacco cultivation and manufacturing on the planet. And those are things that you can highlight during an Earth Day event. We also have our applications for next year's COF Student Leadership Board are now open. You can find those on our website as well. Please spread this information to any students that you're working with that are interested in tobacco or public health. we really do provide these students with a lot of support and training. They get some on-the-ground experience. We bring them to Sacramento a few times a year to provide training. So it's a really great experience for students who are looking to go into public health, policy advocacy, political science, or any health-related disciplines. Finally, the California Tobacco Control Program has a photo contest that's open right now. It's called Tobacco's Impact on My Community. It's open until March 22nd, so that's coming right up. I would like to call this contest Tobacco's Impact on My Campus photo contest. So this is something that you can give your student volunteers or interns to take some photos around campus of what tobacco use is looking like, maybe some of the waste that's on the ground, maybe some of their friends juuling in class, I don't know, whatever it is. Submit the photos. There's a link. I'm going to add this to our website as well. You just submit them to a link. And there's $1,000 being given away in cash prizes. So this is a great opportunity for student advocates to take some photos that also might be helpful to you. I do have one more announcement. I am actually leaving CYAN. My last day is going to be March 22nd. Thankfully, I am staying in tobacco control, and I'm still going to be working on tobacco-free colleges for the California Health Collaborative. And I have to say it was a really, really hard decision to leave CYAN. I have absolutely loved every single minute that I have been working here. It's a great organization. I am going to miss working with all of you so much. But the fact that I'm still going to be in tobacco control and working on tobacco-free colleges, I think I will still be able to stay in touch with many of you, and you're also welcome to contact me anytime with any questions or updates. But yeah, I'm going to miss you guys. I'm going to miss CYAN a lot, but I'm glad that I'm still going to be in tobacco control. So here's my contact information. I'm going to be here for another 2 weeks. So if you want the slides or any of the tools that I mentioned during this webinar, email me, you can call me, and please visit our website, catobaccofreecolleges.org. Let me see if there are any last-minute questions that might have come in here. No last-minute questions. Okay, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.